I mean, I can't wait to watch my brother get tar and feathered and then run around on Riviera Beach pretending to be a seagull. That is going to be hysterical.
Cannot wait, and I hope he's screaming, "I suck at fantasy football. I should have listened to Since the Sandbox."
We've been rocking since the sandbox, man. Stop playing with my dog, Scuba Steve. He the man, got plans, bout to give him what you need. Hot damn, from the court to the field, they elite. I'm saying why, yes, got the hot takes and loose, stay checking. Talking about all the highlights from alleys to interceptions, from tutties to dope receptions and fantasy week projections. And honestly, think you gotta tune in to get the message. Let's go.
Since the Sandbox fans, we are back with our annual Fantasy Football Award Show. For the first time doing the award show with my brother Twan. With this episode, we give so many different awards. We recognize the worst, the absolute assholes in fantasy football, and the absolute best in fantasy football. We're going to talk about the biggest bust, or the biggest asshole, I should say first, the biggest bust in fantasy football. Dying to know if we have similarities or differences in these lists, because we all play fantasy football, but it's just, do you apply this more to your roster? Do you look at this in a league-wide setting? But my biggest bust here, Austin Eckler.
Double down.
Okay.
Double down.
Look, we're talking about the guy that led the NFL in touchdowns last year with 19. He had 6 total touchdowns this year after leading the league. He had 6 single-digit performances. He only had 43 receptions and only had 570 rushing yards. That's not enough for the 4th overall pick. You're talking about an ADP that was anywhere between 2 and 6. Austin Eckler was by far the biggest bust this year, and so were the LA Chargers. They were horrible. Twan, anything you'd like to add in with Austin Eckler?
Steve, I think that's great. In turn with Austin Eckler, another guy that I want to throw his name in the hat because he was a second-round draft pick on a team that was supposed to be lightning on offense. Now, granted, he had an excellent game at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean that all season long he wasn't a bust. T. Higgins was a bust all year long.
Yeah, T. Higgins definitely was a name that might be in some other categories here, and I'll talk about that. But you're talking about what? 6 weeks this season with 0, whether that was to injury or whatever. And I believe that a majority of his fantasy points came in 128-point performance in week 2 or 3 or something like that.
Yep, they had week 2 performance, and then he had like the week 15 performance, where if you weren't in the playoffs, it didn't even matter.
But more than half of his fantasy points came from that one performance, which is absolutely crazy. All right, so Twan, we do our fantasy homework research all throughout the offseason. We're getting ready to give you guys that from July through September to help you draft your teams and set your rankings. So we're going to have some time to brag, and we're going to have some times to be like, yo, I fucking suck for that. So first, we'll get our confidence up a little bit.
Let's go.
And we're going to talk about a player that I was right about. And we talked about this guy on our breakout fantasy players. I looked back on the notes to make sure that was a name that was talked about. A player I was right about, Tank Dell. Nathaniel Dell, rookie out of Houston to the Houston Texans. We talked about how great their story was this year, partnering them up with C.J. Stroud, a new rookie head coach, Will Anderson, the crazy whole draft scenario. And it was like, oh, they were going to come in. They were going to get their quarterback. They were going to get their wide receiver first round. Did not happen. They knew that they could get Tank Dell later on. And, I mean, this guy was absolutely electric. I feel like there's no other word to say for Tank Dell than electric. 6 of 10 healthy weeks, double-digit fantasy points. He had 5+ receptions and 3 23+ fantasy point performances. You're talking about consistent production, right? Being able to be involved in the game plan with the Nico Collins and a Dalton Schultz to have 5 catches a game, that's crazy. And just being able to see how effective he was in such a small sample size. This is a guy in multiple leagues that I'm looking to keep into next year. Tank Dell, if he stayed healthy this year, was going to be a league winner, no doubt.
100%. That's a great pick. Steve, the one that I have 2 here that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to go with the one in a positive facet that I was right about, that we were right about, and saying that this is the year. It's this year or he's not as good as we all thought he was. CD Lamb.
Okay.
We're damn right about CD Lamb. It's about time he showed up as a top 3 receiver in the NFL in fantasy. He showed up. It may have taken him 4 weeks to get those performances week in and week out.
Yeah.
But Steve, CD Lamb went off this year. The best of the best. He is an absolute animal.
Yeah. No, CD Lamb, I mean, and you just saw before this, we were looking at the fantasy matchups. He absolutely helped elevate me in the second half of the season. And this is what we were waiting for. I feel like that was kind of in trend with Dak Prescott's play, but now here's the script. This is the standard for CD Lamb. In that A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp type of category, CD Lamb is there. He's him. He's a back-end 1 first-round pick, if not early second round. Absolutely, I couldn't have agreed with you anymore, and you were also really high on Tank Dell as well, so I'm happy that we had 2 receivers that we were able to talk about here for players that we were right about.
Before we kick it to the next one, I just got to, you know who I didn't know what he was going to be, and I put him low in our running back rankings for where I expected him this year, but he was my number 1 last year. I said last year, his performance at the running back room last year, he was my number 1 running back, the most productive one last year. This year, I said because of the team, he doesn't look like he wants to be there. I don't know where I put him. I had him like mid to low teens on the running back list. Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
It's another name, and that's more of a negative facet and saying, like, I don't know what he's going to be this year. I don't think he's going to be in that echelon again.
Absolutely.
We nailed that one, Steve.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we did. And I feel like that was both of us. It's just really tough to be able to emulate or reciprocate another career year like that. And it was so weird for the Raiders. And along with that, being able to know that Aiden O'Connell was going to take over the team midway through the year was just set up for disaster. But, like, we understand who the Raiders are, and I feel like there's nothing else that could show you that other than our preseason takes about the team. But a player I was wrong about, I feel like it's not always easy to be able to, admit that, right? Especially when you're talking about sports and football and your takes and all that. Player I was wrong about, Rachaad White, I apologize. I was so wrong about you. Look, I know last year was a really interesting year. You came on in the back end, and people had some hope for this year. But me, just doing my homework, gathering my thoughts, I definitely thought it was going to be a different year in the NFC South, and that wasn't the case. I thought the Baker Mayfield-led Bucs were going to be a catastrophe, and that wasn't the case. I thought that this was the team that was going to win the least amount of games this year, along with Arizona. Wasn't the case. Rachaad White, week 7 on, had no lower than 12 fantasy points. Now, I know you're already talking about the first 6 weeks of the season, include a bye in that, but from week 7 to week 14, 12-plus fantasy points every single week. You're talking about consistent production. That's insane. He had all yards. People say all gas, no brakes. We're talking all yards, no brakes. He had over 1,300 scrimmage yards. There were only 9 touchdowns, so, I would think that with the production that he's had, that it would be a little bit more, so I'm shocked that it's not. But Mike Evans had a crazy amount of touchdowns there this year, and 9 is still a pretty solid number.
He was set and forget RB2 for most of the season and ended up being RB1.
RB1, absolutely. He was heavily involved in the passing game. He did start off slow, but I feel like all of that really gathered a great season for Rachaad White, and I feel like if the Bucs do make the playoffs, they're going to continue riding that White and Evans train consistently. So, Rachaad White, I apologize, and I'm sorry. You were great.
And I have to apologize to somebody for not making the quarterback rankings.
Oh,
Dak Prescott didn't make my quarterback rankings, and boy, was I wrong.
Here we go.
Not only was I wrong, but every Cowboys fan that ever doubted you was wrong. Dak Prescott, you're a good quarterback. You're a great quarterback. I was dead wrong. I didn't even put him top 15.
Yeah.
And wrong. He proved me damn wrong, and I'm glad he did, honestly. Yeah. I'm happy to eat my words because Dak's a good dude. He plays hard. He doesn't deserve the crap he gets, and he just shoved pie in my face. The guy literally just proved me wrong, and on the other end, a guy who proved me wrong that I don't like because of it, Mac Jones made that list in the same sentence as I left out Dak. In the same sentence, I put Mac Jones in, and Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can't even apologize for that one.
You can't. It's just what? Oh, my God. I have never seen one individual player regress so much after starting okay. His rookie year, he makes the playoffs. He plays well. His second year, hurts his ankle, starts playing pretty shitty. The fans are cheering for him to get out. And then at the end of the season, he all of a sudden picks it back up as one of the better passing ratings at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Then this year, starts off, puts up points on Philly, at least fantasy-wise, does the same thing the following week, but then just falls off, Jetson off. It's just, man, boy, was I wrong about Mac Jones.
Yeah. Oh, I was so right about Mac Jones.
Enjoy that.
Yeah. But now we're going to move on to our next category. We have our underperformers and overperformers here. I have two that I'd like to really talk about, and maybe a couple more that you'd probably consider. My biggest underperformers come from two of the top selected wide receivers, especially when you consider ADP in most drafts. And for those of you that don't know, ADP, average draft position, I feel like that's a big thing to really follow when it comes to fantasy football. But you talked about him in the power rankings. I'm going to talk about him here. Cooper Kupp, his ADP was 18. Look, he was not the 18th best player in fantasy football. I know that Cooper Kupp is a really good receiver, and I don't want you guys to think that me saying otherwise is talking shit about the dude, because what he's been able to eclipse in his career for his size, for the team that he's been on, and the value that he's provided is tremendous. But in the fantasy facet, it just wasn't there. I mean, he missed, the first 4 to 6 games of the season. Yep. Missed a couple because of injury. Had a 5-week skid in the middle of the season where he only put up less than 6 fantasy points. At the 18th spot in your fantasy leagues, that's not cutting it for what you expected him at. And that's why he's an underperformer rather than a biggest bust, because he did come out and he had 2 or 3 20-point performances, and that's great. But definitely an underperformer. And guys, every single year I say this. I mean, I'm going to keep beating this drum. Next year, the year after, every single year I do fantasy football, Justin Jefferson was an underperformer this year. Yep. ADP of 1. This dude played, 6 games this year?
That's the difference with JJ, though, is the games that he played, he put up 20 points every week.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why he's an underperformer, but in the sense that because you expected him to be healthy and he wasn't.
Not because of skill.
Right.
And I get that, but I still feel like that's just so. I mean, you set your team up with that first pick to use the rest of the rounds to cater around that.
And you draft him because you're like, this guy hasn't gotten hurt yet. He's been healthy. Let's hope he stays healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like you said, he's came in and he played well. But to say that isn't an underperformance, that's just not right. If I drafted Justin Jefferson 1, I wouldn't, because I know better and I listened to Since the Sandbox. But I just think that that's an underperformance. And as great of a player he is, he'll have great receiving seasons for the rest of his career. This is all part of an NFL career.
The least underperformer, he's not a bust, he's an underperformer because of where he got drafted and how he's performed since then. Travis Kelce's underperformed this year.
Okay, love it.
He's underperformed this year because you're looking at people that are taking him 8th overall, 10th overall, and he's scoring, but he's not even the number 1 ranked tight end. Now, he may be 2 in PPR leagues, but regardless, you're drafting him because he's supposed to be a top 5 wide receiving option, not a number 2 tight end.
Absolutely.
So he did underperform, not a bust by any means, but he underperformed, and he has showed insane regression. Another 2 names I want to throw out there is Alex Madison, someone that you were expecting to be an RB1 for the Vikings, put up points, be pretty much essentially the plug-and-play option, because when Dalvin Cook was in there, he would step in when Dalvin Cook was hurt and just do the same thing.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. But a guy who is fringe bust, I'm going with underperforming because he had some good games. Calvin Ridley underperformed significantly this year.
I was totally expecting a Patrick Mahomes here.
He did. He Patrick Mahomes absolutely underperformed, but I'm not going to bash the Chiefs all day because I told everybody that Calvin Ridley was the number 2 wide receiver in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
Skill-wise, I mean, the guy still makes unbelievable catches, but he underperformed significantly this year. He had a couple of great games, don't get me wrong, multiple 20-point performances, but he also had multiple duds.
I'm so happy that I left my ears out just to let you say that, because I knew that you talk so highly about him. I want to say that you listed him 1 as your wide receiver rankings, maybe after a JJ. Yeah.
2 after JJ. Yep.
Yeah. In that same category with the same kind of thought and approach and all of that, Devontae Adams, I feel like, is in that same type of – he's my second for this type of category.
Right.
Look, these are guys that were taken within the top 25 selections of fantasy drafts and just didn't do enough. And for Calvin Ridley's sake specifically, you take away his 2 20-point performances, he has less than 100 total fantasy points this year. That's poor. Christian Kirk, that wasn't the case for Christian Kirk and a lot of other guys around the league. So those are our underperformers. Let's go to our overperformers. There's a lot to talk about here.
I got 2 quarterbacks again, Steve.
I don't have 2 quarterbacks. I have 2 receivers. So I'm excited to talk about it. I apologize to Rachaad White, and we're going to talk about the overperformer here with Mike Evans. Not Matt Toro, Mike Evans. Look, everybody wrote him off. Twan, I'm pretty sure before the season you said that he needed to be traded, and that was a bold prediction of yours, too.
It was.
Wasn't the case. Another 1,000-yard season for Mike Evans, the 3rd best of his career. Not with Tom Brady, not with Jameis Winston. The other 2 years were with those respective guys, but with Baker frickin' Mayfield. That's electric. That shows a lot about Mike Evans. But I have some things here to share with you guys. Mike Evans, this year, only had 3 games. 3 games in single digits. That's insane. Absolutely balling out. League-winning wide receiver right here. He had 13 touchdowns, 3 games over 140 receiving yards, 7 games with 6+ receptions, a historic season, and it's still being written. Mike Evans, overperformer.
That's such a good pick. I can't believe I didn't throw him in here because he's absolutely one, but to go hand in hand with that, and he's not someone that's on this list, but you got to say the same thing for Baker Mayfield.
Okay, I'm all about it.
You got to say the same thing for Baker
way
Mayfield, too. Like, I don't necessarily have him in this list, but it just fits, right? It fits well, but great pick with Mike Evans. I'm glad you said him because I left him out. That's like, as far as, I don't know that you can do snubs for these awards.
That would be it.
That's as close as you can get to one because this dude, way ahead of everybody else. We wrote off the Bucs. I said that they were going to be the worst team in the NFL. I said they were going to be worse than the Cardinals. I was wrong. Holy smokes. Mike Evans, what a year. But Steve, overperformer. Now, we had hopes that he was going to do well. We just didn't know how it was going to turn out. But Jordan Love overperformed this year.
Yeah.
He stepped into that offense where everybody wrote the Packers off, and he played great.
Yeah,
he showed he's the next option. He might not be as good as Aaron Rodgers was at this point, but he is damn good. He's going to be a quarterback in this league for years to come.
And will likely be a keeper in multiple of my fantasy leagues. Just with the things that I saw this year, if the Packers have the offseason that they typically do, he's going to be set for success next year and might be one of the breakout players that we talk about before the fantasy football season. Another name that I wanted to mention here, because I feel like this dude was so disrespected after last fantasy season. It was a drastic year for the Colts. But we can't talk about overperformers without talking about Michael Pittman, who had 2 games this year in single digits. 2.
Yep.
For fantasy receivers, you could have had both Mike Evans and Michael Pittman on your team, not spending a 1st or 2nd round pick on either of those guys.
You could have had like 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Like you might have not even had the top 5 round picks.
Absolutely.
Mike Evans went late in my drafts.
Did he? He probably went in 3rd or 4th in most of my leagues. Yeah. But I do feel like that there was a little bit of disrespect going towards him with the way everything was working out for the Bucs. But he had 100+ receiving yards and over 8 receptions in 10 games this year. That's a crazy amount. And doing that all after your season went to shit. Jonathan Taylor's not here. Anthony Richardson gets hurt. Oh, shit. Gardner Minshew's in. This dude balled out. Absolutely crazy year for Michael Pittman. Now, I hope that the trend continues upward for him because it was a great year, a not so great year. Great year, not so great year. So, I hope that isn't the case for Michael Pittman. I hope we start to see that legacy established. The Colts are a team to watch out for next year.
They are. But the other thing with Michael Pittman is the attention he garnered made better fantasy performances out of other players. Without the garnering all that attention, Josh Downs doesn't have multiple double-digit. But Zach Moss, same thing. Alec Pierce, not as much, but he really helped out a lot of those other guys. Granson playing pretty well sometimes. So Michael Pittman, awesome pick. But the last one, he overperformed maybe in our eyes, because at least in mine, because I saw one bad test score and I wrote the guy off. He's not writing back. But CJ Stroud performed well above where I thought he would be.
Absolutely.
I didn't put him in the top 10 quarterbacks. I don't think I put him in the top 15 quarterbacks. I did think he was going to be lower than that, which I don't think is unfair for a rookie quarterback going to a team that we haven't seen be successful in a number of years.
Yeah.
But this dude, as far as pure talent goes, is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
No doubt.
I would rather him on my team than Justin Herbert.
Than Trevor Lawrence?
I would rather him on my team than Trevor Lawrence.
Wow.
I would rather him on my team other than like a handful of guys. And right now, Mahomes, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Right
you
now,
can't
you gotta
discredit
pick
the
Patrick.
suit.
Right, you have to pick Patrick Mahomes. I get it, but it's not like otherworldly where C.J. Stroud could end up being the best quarterback. It's not out of the world to think that.
I just feel like there's a difference between being an absolutely great talent and being a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Correct, but I'm gonna say it. C.J. Stroud has the talent to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Absolutely, he does. I just don't know if the Texans are a Super Bowl winning franchise.
They're not, but they are looking so much better than they have in years past.
Absolutely.
Even with a not stacked roster like they have right now, they're 8-7 and they're fringe playoffs.
Yeah.
It is incredible to see something like that.
An overperforming season from them as a whole.
As a whole, you're right. I say C.J. Stroud, but this is this is a Tank Dell thing. This is a Devin Singletary thing.
Yeah.
Like, who the hell thought that Devin Singletary was going to have games like
Nico
this?
Collins.
Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz went to the Texans and performed. Nico
The defense.
Collins. Let's say it. The Texans overperformed this year.
Yeah.
But they didn't overperform this year compared to what they're going to do next year, because next year, watch out for the Texans too.
Uh-oh, Tawan's mushing the Texans
Watch
next
out
year.
for the Texans. Watch out for the Texans, man. They're good.
No,
They're a
yeah,
damn
they
good
are.
football team.
They definitely are. All right. 1 year wonder. This one's exciting because I feel like it tells a lot about how you view guys and what the future is for them. This could be a young guy. This can be an old guy. Last year was James Conner, and I feel like I nailed that. This year I think I'm going to nail it again. My 1 year wonder is Raheem Mostert. Look, 21 total touchdowns this year, 6 games of 2+ touchdowns at 31 years old. But keep all this in mind. This is his first 1,000-yard season. Mm-hmm. He scored 126 points this year. And when you consider the rest of his career, adding in touchdowns, he has scored 114 points since 2015. So this year alone, he outperformed his entire career. Going on 32, at a running back, knowing that Achane is going to be there next year. I can't see a team giving this dude the bag for more than 1 year. And he's going to be a complimentary, and the only way he sees a featured role is if there's an injury. And he would do great on a lot of teams, but he is never going to see the volume that he had this year. Raheem Mostert, no doubt in my mind, is a 1 year wonder.
I do. The only reason I stayed away is because he's 31, but he's had big games. But you're right, he's never had a big season. He's never had a big season. He's had big games throughout the season, but it's always been hindered by injuries.
Yeah.
So
he had a 4 to 6 week stretch in San Francisco where he was like, he might have been the best player in fantasy football, but that means shit towards a whole season. That's why I think he's a 1 year wonder.
I'm going with a person that's going to lose their starting job next year because their backup's already playing better than them. But at some point in the season, they were one of the better quarterbacks fantasy-wise in the NFL, even not overall. Sam Howell's a 1 year wonder.
Wow.
Sam Howell
Do
at
you
points
think
this
so?
year. Sam Howell at points this year, man. He would have 3 interceptions and still like a 30-point fantasy performance.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
Insane. The most insane thing I've ever seen. But as we've seen here towards the end of the year, that's really fallen off significantly. Jacoby Brissett's playing better than he has. I don't see Sam Howell having a future as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't. You're going to see Washington. They have a great draft pick. I think it's above the Patriots. They'd be dumb not to use that draft pick on a quarterback at this point.
Wow, Twan. That's a bold one because I feel like yeah, it applies to fantasy football, but I think that's more like the NFL specifically. And I always try and shy away from the quarterbacks because I feel like they get so much recognition as it is. But Sam Howell's an interesting one, and for a large part of this year, he was a top 8 even fantasy quarterback. And the past 4 weeks, like, that really hasn't been the case. Luckily, like, a lot of people had options when they also had Sam Howell on their team. But I don't know. I feel like we saw some promise. I also feel like Washington just kind of gave up after they made those, like, moves and shit, too. I feel like if there was more of a win now mode out of them, like, maybe things would have been differently. But they do have a plethora of receivers. They have a solid line. They had a good running back. It's different. I like it.
Different.
Waiver wire player of the year. Now, we got some comments from Ben. I feel like this is drastically different depending on who you ask. I always try and make my waiver player of the year a guy that I actually picked up on waivers to make it be relatable.
I did the same thing.
Okay, and that's fine. I do feel like that with that being the case, there would be more instances that might apply otherwise. But it'll be different, and the guy that Ben shared, I actually have recognized in a different award. My waiver wire player of the year, it wasn't enough to beat any other different award. It wasn't long, it wasn't sustainable, but it helped a lot of wins. And I feel like that's a huge part of it. My player of the year for the waiver wire is Devon Achane. And I know that that's a guy you could be like, oh, injury, he's a backup, this, that, whatever. But when you talk about an ADP of 109 and having 9 touchdowns in 8 games, 5 double-digit performances in 8 games, a 50-point performance, 4 games over 100 scrimmage yards, and that 50-point performance is only on 20 touches. Like, that's tremendous. It was very short-lived, and we're hoping to see that continue in his career, and I'm expecting him to be the bell cow in Miami next year. This guy won me a lot of weeks. Early on in the season, when I feel like I was dealing with a lot of injuries and Jahmyr Gibbs being a little bit on the struggle bus when Montgomery was doing well, I think Achane is absolutely, the waiver wire player of the year for me.
And I'm glad you went Achane, because my guy got on the IR too for about 4 weeks. But outside of that 4 weeks, he is a absolute monster. One of the reasons the LA Rams are so successful. Steve, Kyren Williams is my fantasy waiver wire player of the year.
I love it. And look, Kyren Williams probably should have got a lot more love on this list than he did, right? It was different because it wasn't a big name. It wasn't a huge drafty or anything like that. He probably should have been on the overperformer type of conversation, but there just was a lot of overperformers, and you don't want to saturate the title either. Kyren Williams, I'm happy that you brought him up. Absolute league winner for most people. Multiple games of 2 touchdowns, multiple games of 100 yards. He might have been the most successful player against the Ravens defense this entire year, this year, along with Puka Nacua, right? Kyren Williams is here to stay. I believe that he's a bell cow. The Rams were so excited about him last year, but he was on injury, and they were just a shit show last year, and nothing actually came to fruition,
Now I understand the Cam Akers thing. It took me this year to understand it, but now I understand why they're like, fuck it, we don't need Cam Akers. Get rid of him.
Yeah, and look, Cam Akers lost his job to Ty Chandler in Minnesota, so.
Ty Chandler's a dude that you should watch out for next year, too. Ty Chandler's looking pretty good.
Definitely better than Madison.
One other guy, Steve.
Oh!
So just to float the name out there, he's not, because Kyron's played better than him all year, but let's not sleep on Jaden Reed.
Okay.
Jaden Reed has played incredible this year. The way they've used him has been very, very unique. This guy in a PPR format is not scoring less than 10 points a week. There are also weeks where he's putting up 25. He's playing awesome football. He's a waiver wire pickup. No one drafted him because he was the number 3 as a rookie that you didn't really know too much about.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed's another guy to throw into that conversation.
No, he absolutely is. And when we come over to our next award, it's our Rising Star Award. Jaden Reed and Kyren Williams can absolutely both be part of that conversation. Now, I feel like more on Jaden Reed's scenario, it was more flashes than statistical, success. And I think that just kind of reflects more on the Packers than anything else. But my rising star this year is also going to be coming from the NFC North, and this is where I have Jahmyr Gibbs.
Nice.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs finishes a top 7 running back from week 7 on. He had 1 single-digit fantasy performance. To date, with the conclusion of week 16, he has 1,200 scrimmage yards and averaging almost 6 yards per carry. This is a guy that you drafted round 3, round 4 in that ADP, depending on how big your league's at. But you were wary about the way that the season started, and now you see how it came to fruition. Jahmyr Gibbs might have been undervalued, especially when you compare Bijan, but I feel like they'll finish with around a very similar type of style for the two of them. I think going forward, both of these guys are going to have huge success in our league. But Kyren Williams and Jaden Reed both can deserve the rising stars. There's not, a whole conversation of parameters that really surround it. Kyren Williams was a little bit more like polished and showed that flash a little bit more. I think Gibbs, we didn't get the full potential because of the split. Jaden Reed, I feel like, was more flashy, so I feel like there's different tiers. But I'm interested to hear who you have here.
Steve, my rising star is someone that we already mentioned because he's become a star on the bat this season. But he is going to be a star next year and for years to come. This is where I put Rachaad White.
Really?
Rachaad White is as to this point, risen to be a star.
Yeah.
This guy came out, like you said, after week 7, did not let up less than 12 points. And I think you're playing half-point PPR.
Yeah.
For
it's even more than
it's
15
even more.
plus.
And that's where you look at this guy, and he's just balling out. Every week, he's just set it and forget it.
Absolutely.
Every single weekend. You never thought you'd say that out of Rachaad White at the start of the season with the way he ran his mouth, with how the Buccaneers were looking. Their offensive line wasn't the strongest, and they just went out there, and he's played incredible football. They struggle a little bit in the red zone. The thing that's made them not is being able to throw and run the ball with Rachaad White.
Yeah. And not only that, I feel like being able to complement Mike Evans with White, and then when you consider White to be able to have single coverage on Mike Evans, made that team a little bit more effective this year.
Absolutely.
They were so one-dimensional last year, running the ball with Leonard Fournette. So it was like, you knew that dude was a little bit more washed. And he was a heavy runner, but he wasn't giving Mike Evans this much opportunity. And I feel like an undervalued player and all of that, Chris Godwin still had a great year.
100%. Chris Godwin still had a great year. And it's funny because on other teams, he's probably getting more recognition. It's just those two guys ate up the offense.
Absolutely. Most annoying player of the year. Twan, was your most annoying player someone you drafted?
No, but you're going to understand why he's the most annoying. You want me to say it?
Yeah, good.
David Montgomery's my most annoying player of the year.
Really?
As a Jahmyr Gibbs owner, David Montgomery's my most annoying player of the year.
Okay, that makes sense.
He's played good. He has played good. He's a good compliment. But to have him have more carries for most of the year over Jahmyr Gibbs is blasphemy to me. It is. It really is. And then you see he goes down and hurt, and Jahmyr Gibbs steps up, and he's one of the best in the league. It's frustrating to me. It's annoying to me as a Jahmyr Gibbs owner to see this guy get the rock 5 more times a game than Jahmyr Gibbs. It's just got to be the other way around.
Yeah, I feel that. That's an interesting take to the most annoying player of the year because your instance is more applicable for Gibbs than it is for Montgomery, the player specifically. So I like that. My most annoying player this year, I drafted him in one league, and luckily I was able to trade him. Aaron Jones. Yeah. Aaron Jones is definitely one of the most annoying players this year. Look, you know that the talent's there. He was just healthy this past week, and you saw A.J. Dillon get in the end zone over him. So, you're like, what the fuck there, right?
And they paid him 2 years ago.
They did. He had not – and look, I understand that this dude was battling injury, but he had 9 weeks this season with less than 3 points. 6 of those came with 0, obviously because of injury. 3 weeks with less than 3 fantasy points. That's insane to me. With all that being said – he had 5 straight seasons prior, averaging over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 7 touchdowns. He's nowhere near that this year. So if you drafted this dude in round 2 or 3, after taking a receiver first, thinking, oh, Aaron Jones is so consistent, no Aaron Rodgers in the offense, they're going to rely on him heavy. He had a huge first week where he took a 70-yard receiving touchdown to the crib. And then you just disappear. Absolutely the most annoying player, especially when you consider his ADP. This dude was drafted in round 3. Insane. Most annoying player, Aaron Jones.
That's a great pick. I forgot that I had drafted him when I ended up trading him. That's how you know. I traded Debo and Aaron Jones when they were both hurt at the same time for Rachaad White and Devonta Smith.
Wow.
So it worked out very, very well. I ended up, and I had Waller on the IR. I had no other tight end to use other than I was streaming Hunter Henry off the waiver wire. I ended up trading Rachaad White flat for Evan Ingram, which I gave up a little, but I needed Evan Ingram something awful, and I was willing to do it because I had Kyren coming back and I had Gibbs starting to show out.
Yeah, I mean,
Singletary I took off the waivers too, so I was doing all right.
The more we talk about Kyron, the more I feel like I disrespected him, not recognizing him on here. So
Don't you worry, because you're gonna listen.
You're gonna get all your flowers.
You're gonna get. I didn't mention a guy because I know where you're gonna have him, and I don't want people to think that I disrespected him. It's just you got to throw some different names out here. If we're saying the same thing over and over again, then it was too obvious of a fantasy season. No fantasy season is absolutely obvious.
Absolutely, Rookie of the Year. I'm excited to share this one. Mm-hmm. I've been passionate about this dude for a little bit now, since he's really developed and established his role. My fantasy Rookie of the Year is Puka Nacua. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a guy that had an average draft position of 272. He was not selected in 90% of fantasy leagues. He finishes a top 7 fantasy receiver, and we see guys like this every single year. You want to talk about respect that we need to put on this dude's name? He finished with more fantasy points than Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, DK, and Devontae Adams.
Did he finish more with Diggs?
Yes. He finished with more points than Diggs.
This guy.
An absolutely crazy season. Puka Nacua had 6 games this year, over 105 receiving yards, and over 8 receptions in all of that. And he had 9 games this year with double-digit fantasy point performances. You're talking about a new name to the wide receiver throne. Puka Nacua is here to stay, regardless of how you feel about Cooper Kupp. This dude will be relevant. This dude will be a consistent top 15 wide receiver. I already think he's better than a guy like T. Higgins going into next year, hands down.
He really could be. We are going to see, I'd like to see a healthy year from T. Higgins. Or I feel like T. Higgins is going to be better off as a 1 with a complimenting 2 than he is being the 2 to a complimented 1.
But it also made me feel like there are some doubts about making him a 1. Like, look at what happened with Kenny Golladay. That's the scenario it reminds me of significantly. Yeah. And I hope that there's not a sorry-ass franchise like the New York Giants that don't learn from their mistake and pay a dude like that again. Before the year, I would have rather made that move for T. Higgins than Darren Waller. But right now, I don't want to pay the wide receiver position, knowing that the draft produces so many guys. And you're seeing a guy like Puka Nacua right here who can absolutely change a franchise.
Yeah. Steve, that's a great pick, and I'm glad you took him because I'm going a little bit of a different route now. Tank Dell's a name you can throw in there. Jameer Gibbs a name you can throw in there. Those are names that we've already talked about. But, Steve, let's give the tight end some love, kid. Let's give that Italian tight end some love.
Let's go.
Sam Laporta is the Rookie of the Year.
Okay,
I love that. Sam Laporta has, what was he, 102, 104 ADP?
Yeah.
And this guy is like the best tight end to have. Like, granted, this week wasn't the best performance on his end, but the team played well. He's got multiple weeks with multiple touchdowns. 2 weeks ago, he had 3 touchdowns in a game off of 5 catches. This guy's legit. And the way Detroit plays, they like to get the ball to a tight end. This dude is going to be here to stay. My most impressive rookie this year is Sam Laporta. I mean,
this is the most historic rookie season from a tight end of all time. Like, and you're talking about crazy names that have came into the NFL, even in recent history.
Right. Gronk.
Yeah.
Hernandez. Of course I started
Stop
with
it.
that. Of
Stop
course
it.
I started there. Kelsey. Tony Gonzalez.
Goddard.
Witten. Goddard. Like, all these dudes.
Yeah,
Steve.
Schultz, Ertz.
Yeah, and Ingram and
Hawkinson,
Year one's best year goes to Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta went off this year. Red zone threat, middle of the field threat. He can block, he can catch. This guy can do it all. He's smart. He knows when to get open if they got to scramble. Like, this dude knows what he's doing out there.
Yeah, Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is a guy that I also feel like I disrespected not having him on the list. And I'm happy that you picked me up here because he absolutely deserves that recognition in a position in fantasy football that I feel like the past couple of years has just felt so
100%.
You know? And he changed that. Dalton Schultz made it a great year. If we come back and we look over at the fantasy rankings, if I can find them, here we go. You know, being able to mention a guy like him, Njoku, Ferguson, all these guys are having really good years. So, but he had a better year than all of them.
It's fun to be a tight end again.
It is fun to be a tight end. Absolutely. I'm assuming for our MVP conversation, we have 2 names here. I'll take one. You can take the other.
Beautiful.
I'm not going to take the one that you hate because I feel like you just wouldn't give him the proper flowers.
I would give it to him. I don't hate him. I hate his team.
Oh, we might be talking about a different guy.
Oh, boy.
Is Tyreek Hill an MVP for you?
Tyreek Hill's not an MVP for me.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Shit.
I do hate him. Don't worry. I hate him.
Okay, so I'll talk about Tyreek Hill for a little bit here. There are two guys I have listed as MVPs, and I'll talk about stats for both, and I'm interested to hear yours. I also feel like Kyren Williams could be in this category. Rightfully so. But Tyreek Hill here, he had 12 touchdowns, 100-plus receptions, 1,600-plus receiving yards, and for a point this season before injury, was on pace for over 2,000. He had 0 games this year with less than 8 fantasy points. He had 6 performances of 140-plus yards. Absolutely crazy year. We thought that going from Mahomes to Tua, that being paid $30 million wasn't going to reflect properly at the wide receiver position. It absolutely did. Tyreek Hill was a league winner for many. I know we're both going to talk about Christian McCaffrey here. Have some stats that I just really want to.
Go nuts. Go
Yeah,
nuts.
Christian McCaffrey, I mentioned it earlier in the episode, had 100 more points than the next closest fantasy football running back. The second one was Raheem Mostert. Christian McCaffrey had 100 more points than him. That's insane. Just talking about that. He had 10 performances of 20-plus points. He had 21 scrimmage touchdowns, just under 2,000 scrimmage yards. He had only 2 games this year with less than 2 receptions, so it shows how he's capable in the passing game and the running game. He had 4 performances of 28-plus fantasy points. That's unreal production from a single player.
That's one dude.
We're talking about a guy that next week will probably eclipse 400 fantasy points. That's not a quarterback.
Isn't it crazy that they still won the trade somehow?
Yeah.
To give that for a running back, they still won the trade, San Fran.
Shanahan knew he was up to.
He knew what he was doing. Christian McCaffrey is my MVP. Don't get that wrong. But the other name that I wanted to throw in there is not Tyreek Hill. Can you guess who it is?
I don't know.
It's Josh Allen, Steve.
Wow.
Josh Allen's the number 1 fantasy scorer in and out.
Yeah, wow.
And this dude is slinging turnovers into linebackers' hands, and he's still the number 1 fantasy option. Like, this guy gets drafted in round 3, and he's still the number 1 option through and through. And it's like, he makes mistakes. It doesn't matter. He's the number 1 scorer of the week because he gets 30 anyway. This guy is something special, man.
Wow. And
fantasy-wise, he's something special.
this is another guy that I feel like should have been talked about a whole lot more on here. And it's tough. There's a lot of awards, a lot of recognition to go around. And when you compare it to the regular season, like, I guess, like, that's just something that just slips a little bit because the Bills were just so up and down. But, yeah, I mean, he was drastically the best fantasy football quarterback this year. I know Hurts gets a lot of love and recognition for the rushing touchdowns, and usually Josh Allen is more in that category, but he was just slinging it this year on the yardage. I mean, he probably might have had 2 games under 275 passing yards this year. I can't confirm that, but if I had to assume, it would probably be around that category. That's a great one, Twan. Love that.
New names.
Yeah, we love that.
You like that, Kev? Give me that smile.
Twan, how'd you feel about the award show?
Love the award show. This is my first time being a part of the award show. It was awesome to do it. I can't wait to do it again next year already. But
any other categories that you feel like we might have missed?
Oh, I love. You know how much I don't want to say I'm a hater, but you know how much I like to keep people in check sometimes. Let's talk shit about a rookie that we thought was going to be good but didn't end up being good.
That's not him, though. That's not him. He's talking about Bijan Robinson. But
no,
I
wasn't talking about I actually am not talking about anyone specifically.
I thought you were talking about Bijan because I was going to say that's Arthur
something
Smith.
We could consider. It's 100% Arthur Smith, 100%. And you can say the same thing in years past about Kyle Pitts, but again, it's Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
So I don't have anyone specifically for a name, but it would have been something fun to just. Actually, I do. Quentin Johnston, bust.
Yeah. He's a bum.
Bum.
He's a bona fide bum.
What a bust.
Well, since the Sandbox fans, we hope you enjoyed our Fantasy Football Award Show, our 3rd annual. And we invite you back every year. Guys, we always give you the best with the fantasy football rankings. We make it personal. We make it comical, but we're keeping it factual. And that's the most important part. There's a lot of off-season things coming to you guys. We have our positional rankings. We have our top 25. We have previews, X factors, and breaking down all the playoff games and performances. We got the draft and the off-season talk. We're excited. Football continues. Guys, you know the deal. Peace, love, 5 stars, nothing less.